Hello, welcome to the Friendly Circle Berlin. My name is Patrick, and we hold these workshops every Monday night at 7:30 Berlin time, and they're open to anybody who's interested, and you can join live. There's details about that, the Zoom link in the description below this video if you're watching on YouTube. And today our title is Emotional Sobriety, Living a Meaningful and Valued Life. And our workshop today is put on by our good friend John Cunningham from Ontario, Canada. John has celebrated over 50 years of continuous sobriety, practicing the 12 steps. And John teaches and practices evidence-based methods to improve well-being, utilizing exercises and principles to see lasting change. And that's from his description from his website. You'll find a link to John's website also in the description below this video. And we really appreciate you, John, for all you do. For our group, you put on, this is number 6 of 7, a series of 7 workshops that John is doing for us along the theme of emotional sobriety. So we really appreciate it, John. And now I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patrick. It's nice to be here. And can everybody hear me okay? I'm outside. Everything's fine? Okay, great. I just didn't want the wind to be interfering with the microphone. So I'm outside here in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and a beautiful summer day, and looking forward to being with you, and I'm excited to be with you today. And like Patrick said, I am an alcoholic, and I belong to a group called Agape Group, which is a Greek word for unconditional love. And it's a meditation meeting, and I co-founded that group as I did another meditation meeting because meditation was extremely important to me. So my journey is in 50 years of, over 50 years of sobriety now, has been a zigzag and up and down and a loop-de-loop kind of roller coaster ride. And when I was sober for about 25 years, I come to realize that there was something missing in my life. It's not like I did the steps wrong or I wasn't doing it hard enough, or it wasn't any of that. It was just this yearning that I had, that I saw in myself, that my emotions were overwhelming at times and controlled and driven by my behaviors. And, my negative and critical thinking was interfering with the quality of life I had. And I didn't know what to do with that. And of course, I did what was recommended. I prayed and hoped that things would get better. And one day, someday, all that will disappear, and it didn't. And this is my journey, by the way. It may not be yours. And so what I did was I decided to go out and try to do some research on what is called in the professional world emotional regulation versus dysregulation. And we, in the 12-step recovery room, we call it emotional sobriety. And I wanted to learn as much as I possibly could about the way in which I was thinking, how to deal with my thoughts, how to deal with these emotions that would crop up. In moments I have success with them, and all of a sudden they come back again. I was really confused. And of course, in the place of confusion, all it was to do was to blame myself. There was something wrong with me, which fed into the self-criticism. And my sense was I was having limited beliefs and so on. And so I took to research this idea and to learn what it's going to take for me to have emotional regulation, to be able to train the way in which I was thinking, to soften up these rigid beliefs I had, limiting beliefs I had about myself. And in some ways, I think that was the reason why I drank, because I was trying to get away from this experience, this painful experience of restlessness, irritability, and discontent, as the good Dr. Silkworth points out in the doctor's opinion of the Big Book. And I want you to notice the sequence of that event. I want you to notice something. First, there was restlessness, irritability, and discontent. Then the addict reaches out for, in this case, alcohol, for comfort and ease. So the sequencing became very, very important because what I realized that if I removed alcohol, what remained was this restless and irritable and discontent. And like any addict, I'm trying to maneuver around sobriety and trying to make the best of my life and my family and doing the best of the work and so on. I was still being fashioned by these limiting beliefs and negative thinking and inner critic. All, by the way, glued by this thing called fear. I had so much fear in my life, and I've had it for so long, I didn't even know I had it because I couldn't remember not having it. And I became like the fish in the water. You see, the fish doesn't know he's in water. He's been in water all its life. So it doesn't know what it's like not to be in water. And that's the same with me when I would talk about emotional overwhelm. I was a slave to this idea of emotions. And I didn't know what to do about it. I just didn't know. I didn't know. I applied some self-will and tried to correct them and regulate them. And it seemed to go away for a while. And I was getting confident. And all of a sudden they come back. And I'm thinking, oh, my God, what's going on there? So I decided to get some, not only research, but do some training in this area. And I became a mental health coach as a result of this, because I was so interested in this idea of well-being that I did not want to be a bird with a bruised wing because of addiction. I wanted to be free. I want to be able to be fully self-expressed, to have a zest and enthusiasm for living, willing to risk, willing to be out there and do my best every day and find the joy and peace that I think every human being seeks. We who are addicted tend to think differently. Like we fashion ourselves with what's wrong with me. And unfortunately, I grew into a habit, and I don't know if you can identify with this, but I overinvested myself in my defects of character. And I would look at them and look at them and look at them. And I started unconsciously defining myself as my defects of character. So not only was I saying I am an alcoholic, I would say things like I am selfish, I am angry, I am frustrated, I am stressful. I want you to picture this word, this verb and noun, I am. And what it does is speaks to my identity. And I was saying this over and over again in steps 4 and steps 10. I was doing every evening step 10. I began to get diminished as a human being. Not that the step 10 is wrong, but the way I was applying it was wrong. I misunderstood. See, today I do my step 10, not with my identity, but with my behavior, which is a very different thing. So I am not selfish as a human being, but I have selfish moments. Sometimes my behavior is selfish. There's a slight distinction here, but what it does is separates me as an identity from the weaknesses in which I have. Now, why is that important for this discussion today? It's important because when I removed myself from that, I was no longer those defects of character or those weaknesses. I had them, and I had to be responsible for them, but they were not me. I was someone in behind those thoughts, those beliefs, and those feelings. You see, a human being has dignity. And even though our behavior at times, one would think that dignity isn't part of that, but we always have dignity. And we always have worth, something I didn't know. I felt I was worthless. And all this angst I have around this self-identity was making me, well, just to put it this way, I didn't have much emotional sobriety because I was shoulding myself, musting myself, nevering myself, ought to, I was doing everything in my power to be anything but who I was. The true fact is I didn't know who I was. Oh, I put labels on myself, but they weren't accurate. They were incomplete. And what I've learned is that these labels that I put on myself, I was always based in the past, always based in the past. And that, and reflecting on those situations and experiences, they were always incomplete. There was some fact there, and there was a lot of fiction there, because I put a story to the fact. I'll give you an example of what I'm saying. If I asked a girl out in high school to go on a date and she rejected me, the fact was she rejected me. What I made it mean was that I was not dateable, that I wasn't attractive or handsome enough, that I wasn't appealing to the opposite sex. See, I made it mean that, but that's not what happened. One girl decided, no, she doesn't want to go out with me, but I made it into something universal. So when you start thinking about it and start separating these things, we begin to see our past is unreliable to who we are. And those labels I put on myself, I come to learn separated me from any kind of self-acceptance and emotional sobriety, because I was always trying to change. So in these workshops I've been offering you is based on my professional experience. I have a coaching business and a course business that I use, actually teaching the methods, recipes, and playbooks on how to develop emotional sobriety. So these things are near and dear to me, and I've gone way out of my way to understand what the extent to which that I needed to work at least on achieving emotional sobriety. So what I'd like to just show you is some of the things that we've done here. And I'm just going to share a picture. And hopefully you can see the picture. Can everybody see that? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Now, this is a wheel. Now, I'd like you to imagine a bicycle wheel. And in that bicycle wheel, you'll notice that there are spokes. One might wonder, well, why are there spokes? The spokes are there to give integrity to the wheel, to strengthen the wheel. That's what the spokes do. That's the job of the spoke. This wheel has spokes. And these are conditions to emotional sobriety, contributors. The first workshop I did was on self-acceptance. So self-acceptance is a foundational piece to be emotionally sober. That instead we're looking in the mirror and saying, what's the matter with me? We're in the mirror looking to say, I am enough. Now, it's not enough just to say that. There are things that are happening underneath that we need to investigate that keeps us from full unconditional self-acceptance. But you can see very quickly that self-acceptance is a contributor to emotional sobriety. Next is something called maximizing one's strengths, talents. And here we run into all kinds of interference in our culture, in the focus that most of us put on in the 12 steps, which is the defects of character. We're going in the opposite direction. We're always asking what's wrong with me. But in science, it suggests that in order to achieve this emotional regulation, we need to be looking for exercising and developing our strengths. Now I'm going to tell you a quick story. The quick story is simply this. I could ask anybody in the 12-step room, what's wrong with you? And they, if they're willing to, would articulate exactly what's wrong with them to the minutest detail. It's very clear to them what's wrong with them. And that demonstrates the amount of effort and energy that they've given to analyzing what's wrong with them. Next question, what's good about you? Then you get the fish eyes. People start talking in generalities to make an attempt to show that they know what's good about them, but there's no exactness because they haven't been paying attention. It's not because they don't have strengths. It's because they haven't been noticing them and celebrating them and expanding them and developing them. And what the science says in this matter is in order to have emotional regulation, we need to be in our wheelhouse of our strengths, not eliminating defects, which is kind of a myth that I developed in doing the work that I was doing. The next wheel is mindfulness. And I'm going to ask you something here right now. I want you to get present with me. I want you to practice mindfulness with me in this moment. And all we have to do is pay attention to our breath. Very simple exercise. And just as you're paying attention to your breath, both inhaling and exhaling, what you're doing is catapulting yourself to the present moment. Why is this important? When we are in the present moment, we are being what they would call situationally aware. We're aware of our experiences. We're paying attention. We're available. We're not in the past with all our preoccupation. No, we're actually here, paying attention, being present. Very powerful way to help us with emotional sobriety. And one of the cute exercises is this: as you get in the presence of now, where's the problems? See, they seem to disappear. All the preoccupation you have about difficulties or challenges or problems get moved to the side. They haven't actually gone away. They actually get moved to the side, and there is a clearing for you to live in this moment. Mindfulness brings us to emotional sobriety. We need to have coping and resiliency tools to deal with the storms in our life, because we're going to have storms. They're unavoidable. Sure, some people may say things will get better, and they may not. But what we can claim is that we will get better using coping and resiliency mechanisms to deal with the hardships of life. Every human being needs to be moving forward. There's a sense that the human being needs to grow inherently. And this is where goals and motivation comes from. The desire and the achieving and the progress of moving forward. Many of us have stopped exercising our goals because we're terrible at goal setting. One reason is because of our perfectionism. We overestimate and expect things that we cannot deliver on. So what we do, we stop setting goals instead of adjusting our expectations. But when a human being is on a journey, and that journey is progressing, that human being feels that they are whole and complete. Next thing is positive relationships. Every one of us have to have positive relationships in our life. And you can imagine not having a positive relationship in your life and how much distance that puts you between emotional sobriety and yourself. You know, if you're arguing, if you're if you don't like the people you're around and you're distancing yourself and you're isolating yourself, these are all avoidance mechanisms away from emotional sobriety. So we have to learn to develop positive relationships in what we're doing so that we can approach emotional sobriety. When we have strong and positive relationships in our life, we feel good about ourselves. There's unity there. There's a sense of connectedness, of belonging that each human being searches for. And this is what it means to have positive relationships. So you can begin to see the degree in which I've been working. And today we're going to be talking about meaningful and valued living. Now, I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey, and I hope you don't mind. That journey is a metaphorical journey. And I want you to imagine yourself being in the journey with me. So I'm going to ask you to be mindful and being present by paying attention to your breath and practicing mindfulness with me for a moment. And I want you to use the strength of persistence and patience with me as you allow yourself to be open to a story of which I'm about to tell you. So all of a sudden, and I want you to forget about self. You are okay and you are enough. So just put that aside for the moment. So already we're starting to practice some of these spokes in the wheel. So friends, once upon a time, there was a protagonist embarked on a journey, the vast expanse of existence. At the beginning of their quest, they were adrift in a world devoid of meaning, a desolate desert, where each step felt empty and purposeless. The absence of meaning casts a shadow over their heart, leaving them yearning for something greater. Driven by the deep longing, the protagonist sets out on a path of self-discovery. They encountered mentors and guides along the way, wise sages who illuminated the darkness and provided insight to life's purpose. These mentors shared stories and lessons, teaching the protagonist to look within themselves for answers and seek meaning in the smallest amounts. As the journey unfolded, the protagonist faced numerous trials and challenges. They grappled with doubts and fears and moments of despair, but persevered, fueled by the burning desire to find meaning. With each obstacle conquered, they better understood themselves and their world. Amidst the trials, a profound realization emerges within the protagonist. They discovered that meaning was not an external destination or a grand revelation waiting to be found, but a transformative perspective woven into the fabric of their being. The true meaning of life resides in the pursuit of growth, connection, and contribution. Empowered by this newfound insight, the protagonist reached the promised land, a place where meaning blossomed abundantly. And it was a serene garden, lush in purpose and fulfillment. And in this place, the protagonist embraced their gifts and passions, using them to impact others and the world positively. In this final stage of the journey, the protagonist becomes a beacon of inspiration, radiating the light of meaning to all they encounter. Their story became intertwined with the stories of others as they helped fellow seekers find their paths to meaning and shared in their collective pursuit of purposeful existence. And so the hero's journey to finding meaning in life came full circle, a tale of transformation, growth, and the realization that meaning resides not in the distant destination, but in the courageous and intentional pursuit of a life aligned with one's values, passions, and betterment for humanity. Can you see yourself in that story? Could you see and get a sense of how important it is to have some sort of meaning for life? You know, sometimes I think when I look back at my recovery, I had no sense of my meaning and purpose. All I could see was my addiction. All I could see was my defects of character. And today I would think of myself as a sailboat without a rudder or a steering wheel, being at the whims of the wind, going here and going there, and wherever the boat ended up would have to be okay. See, finding meaning gives us the rudder and the steering wheel. Meaning. Now, today we're going to talk about 4 things What does it mean to mean something? What does meaningful mean to each of us? Why does it matter? How do we make sense of it? And what are our values? See, this gives us the anchor in which to start our journey in living. So in this great book, if you've read it, you probably loved it. Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl talked about his experiences. And he was a psychiatrist. He was a prisoner in the Holocaust camps in Nazi Germany. He wrote a book, and he spent his life being a public figure, talking about his pain and suffering and how he grew from it. So to him, there were three paths of meaning. It's the purposeful work and achievement that one has that gives us reason to keep moving. And by engaging in meaningful work or pursuing significant goals, we would feel that our journey is something worthwhile, and therefore we are worthwhile. Second is utilizing skills and abilities for the greater good. We in the 12-step rooms are fortunate enough because it's a natural progression of our recovery to reach out to somebody. Now, but there is a way in which to reach out to somebody with a good heart, with an intention of assisting, nurturing, and validating other people, not because you have to. Making a positive impact in the world. Experiencing love and connection, the sense of belonging is meaningful to people and human beings. Having meaningful relationships and connections are vital for us to grow as human beings. Love, compassion, and human connection provide a sense of belonging. What is our attitude towards suffering? Like I said, we're not going to be able to avoid suffering or pain in our life. It's inevitable. It is part of living. And that's not to be dark or negative. It is just a simple fact. But how are we preparing ourselves to deal with the storms in our life? Do we have the coping and resiliency available to us that we can confidently go through a storm without being thrown off? So finding meaning in the unavoidable suffering. And we get to choose one's attitude and response to challenging circumstances. This is called autonomy. The ability to choose is so very important to a human being. When we use words like shoulds or musts or never or the tyranny of or, we're not choosing a direction. We're being forced into a direction. Even though we might be doing it to ourselves, we're still being forced. And what happens when a human being feels forced? They feel threatened and they're reluctant to continue, and they look for the first exit to get out. However, if someone chooses to, that's a very different experience. And I'm often reminded in the book, the big book, it talks about this idea, if you are ready, or excuse me, if you know what, it just dropped out of my head, I'm sorry, friends. If you want what we have, so here's an invitation. If you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. You hear the invitation to that. We're not telling people what to do. We're inviting them to make a choice. So that's the genius of some of the big book. It is descriptive and it is inviting. It's a great principle to live our lives by. Am I inviting myself into an experience by choice or because I think I have to? So here we are. We're starting to unravel the sense of meaning. Meaning enriches lives and provides a sense of purpose and fulfillment. Individuals can cope with adversity and maintain resilience by finding meaning. See, even the storms in our life become better when we know that we have meaning and purpose. So what are the takeaways? Meaning can be found in purposeful work, significant goals, and making a positive impact. Write that on your to-do list. Have an intention to when you do your work, whatever your work is. If it's an avocation, that's fine. But to do it purposely and do it to your best of your ability. Have goals in front of you that will have you blossom into it. Don't worry about the outcome of the goals. Celebrate the progress of it because you're learning all the time. And have an intention of making a positive impact in people's lives. Meaningful relationships and connections contribute to a sense of belonging and support. Choosing a positive attitude towards suffering can lead to personal growth and resilience. You see, everything in nature has purpose, has value, everything. And although we think that when the rain comes on our face is a disaster, we don't like it. We rather have a different kind of weather. The weather actually it has value for us to learn. So when we're faced with guilt, or we're faced with anger, or we're faced with stress or resentment, it has value. We can learn from those experiences if we choose to learn from them rather than to, whine or complain about them. Every one of us have experiences fear, anxiety, stress, upset, shame. All of us understand that as a human being. We've all experienced it. So since we've all experienced it, we come to know that it's a human condition and it's not just happening to us. The value of it is there's something for me to learn. So meaning is a very subjective and very philosophical. As I was preparing for this workshop, I was trying to make it practical rather than get into some deep philosophical discussion. So meaning, we can look at meaning and say, well, from a cognitive perspective, from a thinking perspective, it's all about reappraising the situations, forging a sense of coherence, a puzzle to solve of life experiences. See, we're not complaining about it or judging it anymore. We're looking to solve a puzzle. It's also seen as a motivator, what they call a motivational construct that fuels pursuing worthwhile goals. It's like the North Star guiding us in that boat that we talked earlier. It gives us direction. Meaning gives us direction. It creates a path to move forward. And if we're really into the word of meaning, that path becomes lit up, bright. I'm often think about the movie, The Wizard of Oz. And that path was like gold, remember? We've just had to follow the path. So what are some common terms about meaning? And you can use the word coherence, significance, value, relevance, and purpose. All of these are interconnected to what it makes mean of something that illuminates meaning or meaningfulness. And it's also very individual. I'm sure you've seen in some of the 12-step rooms, somebody who has the shine in their eyes, who are passionate about recovery, who seem to be gifted with the idea that this is their reason for living. And you can tell that's what they think because, again, the sparkle in their eyes, the enthusiasm in their voice, the sense of commitment that they have for pursuing excellence. And you might think so, wow, that's pretty impressive. Why am I not like that? Well, maybe it's because that's not what was meaningful to you, that you have yet to find meaning in your life to give you that spark, to give you that motivation, to give you that passion. You see, we can't fake this. Either we're on the stream of our meaningfulness or we're not. So, but why does this matter? We're going to talk about meaningfulness, mattering, making sense, and values. Why does this matter? So it has to do with personal relevance. It just has to do with purpose, value, relevance, and significance of all pertain to a subjective feeling that something really matters. It's got to be important to us. The meaning that we feel in our lives needs to be important to you as an individual. There's no one thing shops all kind of thing. It's you finding your meaning so that you can pursue your goals. You can pursue your excellence. So, how do we make sense of all this? This is a very challenging subject to find meaning. Well, first of all, making sense of it is the ability to separate patterns and structures and interrelatedness of our experiences. In other words, we need to be reflecting on the experiences we're having, not saying they should be some other way, but to actually be with the experience we're having so that we can begin to unravel the experience to see where there's meaning in it. And as we come to this exercise of doing that, what you'll discover is something is a gem. It's a gem because it will spark your life. You're no longer that bird with a bruised wing limping around because of an addiction. You truly have a mission, a passion to move towards. So it helps, making sense of it helps us to anticipate and control and manipulate situations, serving as an evolutionary purpose. In other words, we're guided by this sense. We're being guided by a principle, a virtue that we have, that we align our behaviors, our thinking, and feelings with, and that we do our best to fulfill it, and recognizing and detecting when we're off that path. Making sense of our experience is essential for experiencing the meaning of life. So if you're the kind of person just moves from one experience to another, to another, without stopping and reflecting, this talk will mean nothing to you. But I caution you, if you stop even for a very few moments and start reflecting on the experience that you're having, great things will come to you. So chaotic and messy situations can be challenging to imbue with meaning as they don't fit into our personal narrative. So out of chaos comes order. This is what we find when we're reflecting and looking for meaning and why it matters, is that we're starting to see a sense of order to our lives. The things that we want so very much, but somehow we got missed, that we just couldn't get it, is probably because it was the absence of meaningfulness. Invest yourself in some time, friends, to discover for who you are this idea of meaningful. Now, we're guided by values. We begin to see how these pieces of puzzle start fitting together. What are values? Well, let's just talk about values for a few moments before I cut it off. Personal values are held deep beliefs and principles that guide and influence an individual's attitudes, behaviors, and decision-making. Can you get a sense of this? If we have values up in front of us, And I love this phrase, and I hope you write this down. I carry this with me constantly, is that I'm living in the language of my values. That's how I'm living. I'm living in the language of my values. So that statement guides me on the path. So what are my values? I'll give you some in a moment. They serve as a foundation for individuals' moral and ethical compass, shaping their preferences, their priorities, and goals in life. Personal values are often developed through cultural, social, familiar, and personal experiences. Personal values can vary between individuals, reflecting their unique perspectives and beliefs and priorities. So it's not about looking at someone else's for your values. It's really about investigating your heart. What is coming up for you? What is important to you? What's relevant? One could be integrity, upholding honesty and trustworthiness, and the ethical behavior in all aspects of life. Integrity. Imagine employing integrity in everything that you do. Now, sometimes you're going to fall off, and you're going to detect that and move back onto it. That is a zigzag cycle of human experience. We don't make moral judgments as a result of that. We just go ahead and continue on. Respect. Treating others with consideration, dignity, and fairness. Imagine going into a conversation with the leading virtue of respect. Treating others with consideration and dignity and fairness. How do you think that conversation will go? Responsibility. Taking accountability of one's actions, obligations, and commitments. In steps 8, 9, and 10, they talk about this idea of making amends, being responsible for behaviors. Compassion, demonstrating empathy, kindness, and care towards others. We in the 12-step room, we call it tolerance, a loving tolerance towards all. Compassion. When you're demonstrating empathy and kindness and care towards others, how do you think that relationship will go? Courage. Being willing to take risks and confront challenges and stand up for what is right. There's an old saying, if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for everything. Have courage. Develop your courage as a virtue. Equality, evaluating fairness and justice and equal opportunities for all individuals. Freedom, cherishing personal autonomy and independence and their right to self-expression. Friends, those are just a few ideas about virtues. My hope is that you've learned something here that has intrigued you and has you get into action in the development of what your life is meaningful to you. That you set a path in front of you to fulfill that meaningfulness through the virtues in which you're establishing and identify with that you are reflecting in your day-to-day experiences. Just one last thing, I'm going to turn it back. I offer a free discovery meeting with me. I'll put the calendar link. I'll just ask you this: if you do decide you want to have a discovery meeting with me to talk about your significant strengths and something that's holding you back, to have an action plan. If you're going to book a meeting, please follow up and be there. And if there's a cancellation, if you things have changed for you, so if you cancel, get out there. I just ask you to respect my time if you are going to book.